Hey guys, welcome to Hughes History. I kid you. I swear I'm not going to pop up again, but I am going to start this interview by saying how grateful I am to be a part of the Southern Collective experience. I know that a lot of thought, a lot of ideas, a lot of creativity surrounds everything that this thing touches. So Cliff asked me to do this, Mr. Brooks. I'm, again, humbled to do it, so I'll just kind of answer the questions, Hughes. And the first thing really was kind of the story of me, I guess, which is kind of creepy and weird to talk about. But the story of Keith Hip Hughes is that I was born in 1972 in Putnam Valley, New York. Putnam Valley is kind of a small, I don't want to say rural, and I don't want to say suburban. Can I say suburbal? We were about probably 70 miles, maybe 50 miles from New York City. We were close to a town called Peekskill, New York. Facts of life, shout out. How about that? But I always describe my upbringing as, if you watch the Gilligan's Island TV show, that's all I did. My mom was a nurse. My father worked in a lumberyard as a union teamster his whole life with his hands and always smelling like sawdust. He passed away in 2002. My mother is still kicking it, but very comfortable. I was always fed, always kind of a happy kid. But in terms of being aware of like culture and politics and the world around me, I would say I was probably watching Gilligan's Island or the Brady Bunch or maybe Sanford and Son. And Cliff asked me in kind of the notes about, my early reading experiences, and I wish I could lie, and I can't, and tell you that I was a lifelong reader from a very early age as I soaked up the words off the page and it made me a better person, but that would be not true. So in terms of early reads, I don't have a lot. And even talking about like my educational experience, you would think that me being a kind of a teacher, an edutainer, teacher, tweeter, YouTube kind of person, that I had these awesome educational experiences. And again, I would describe it as suburbal little boxes. Melvina Reynolds shout out. How about that? That, I just wasn't aware. Kind of went through the machinery of the school system, not really having a great experience, but also kind of being carried along the current of everybody else into a college experience. And it really wasn't until after that, until I really turned myself on to ideas about education and paradigms and kind of the way we think about thinking and learning. I had a few great teachers. Mr. Cole comes to mind. He was pretty cool. And then I start to struggle. I'm sure I had other good teachers, but none that really sparked my interest in teaching. Let's just kind of put it that way. After high school, I would say that while I didn't have great professors, I did start to read. And I think that my own self-journey into the world around me occurred because I started to read. And I know I read Catcher in the Rye in high school, but it was Kurt Vonnegut, actually, that turned me on to reading and really not just black humor, but just to be interested in the world around myself. And from there, I kept on reading. I'm going to go to the second question. See, I didn't do a pop-up. How about that? Talking about the profession of teaching and how it's changed now, a little bit of background about myself. I began teaching a little bit older than when other teachers I knew started. I was probably 28, 29 when I started. This was 2000, 2001, 1999, somewhere in that sphere. So I taught U.S. history, AP government for about 14, 15 years at a large urban high school, diverse school, McKinley High School, go Max, that was the bane of my existence. And if I was to describe how teaching changed, I would say that I didn't change, but I think teaching changed. And now I'm actually doing this as I'm about to teach at graduate school at the University of Buffalo, literacy and technology. So I have a lot of ideas about theory and how education should be, but how it changed around me was that they pretty much left me alone in the beginning, that I believe that teaching is as much as an art as a science. So, sometimes it's the singer and the song, that it's not just you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you need a Mick Jagger. Not everybody is going to be a great bowler. We're sorry to break it to you. And not everybody's going to be a great ballerina, and not everybody's going to be a great teacher. So I think that one thing that I learned as I kind of give advice before I talk about how teaching changed was that if you go into teaching because you love your content, that you're going to have a broken heart, and so are a lot of kids who come in front of you. You have to love teaching more than your content. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of broken-hearted kids, and your heart's going to break as well. So how has teaching changed? Well, it's become more scientific, it's become more mathematical, it's become more datatized in an effort to produce more results because, of course, learning can be measured on a little piece of paper and in a computer and such. Obviously, I don't believe that. I believe that sometimes learning is invisible, and while data is important, we should measure ourselves and try to use different measures of evaluation, so it's not just paper and pen and fill out the dots computer tests, but also it's observation and psychology and other methods of seeing if somebody is engaged or not. But that process of how they have done that has really gotten in the way of teaching. So now it's a lot of measurements. So I tried to stay the same. I tried to ignore that for a long time, the mandatory regulations, the people that came in with their rubrics of measurement, basically to see if I was doing a good job. So I'll give you an analogy because I'll talk too long about this. I always used to say, and I say it today, that teaching is like building a bridge, and that when the children walk over the bridge and they get to the end of the bridge, that then you can see how successful they have been. So whether that be the exam or the graduation or, some kind of accomplishment, my job was to build the bridge and to do that authentically with students and be reflective and do everything I could to build the best bridge that I could. And then the bridge experts came in. And they weren't really bridge experts, I kid you, and neither were they real teachers. They were educational experts. And they found out the perfect way to build the bridge. And they were going to give me a blueprint, and they were going to measure me and have me observe myself building the bridge as they helped me build the bridge with scripted learning and modules. And guess what happened? It got in the way of bridge building. So I ignored them for a long time, and I probably could have still ignored them because thankfully I have tenure. You didn't think about that when you argue about tenure, did you? So I was able to practice my craft, but then it just became too much, too cumbersome, too many meetings, too many bad professional developments. So unfortunately, I left the classroom. Actually, I have a video on that, Why Data Killed the Teacher Star. You can go watch that, and I explain it more in detail. But definitely the teaching profession has changed, and if I had to give one piece of advice to new teachers, I would say to do your best to center yourself in your own pedagogy and to game it, to work the system the way that you need to work the system. But if you believe in the art of teaching, it's like believing in the art of medicine. You're not going to change the way you treat a patient because of some, regulation that came out of some non-doctor's office. So I'm going to go to the next question. So where did the inspiration behind Hughes come from? I wish I had a story. I could make up a story, a really inspirational one, but it wouldn't be true. I have different demographics. There's different types of people that watch Hughes history, and I'm glad that it's been beneficial to other types of people that I didn't intend to help when I started it. But the story really comes down to a pragmatic decision I made to help the kids in my class. Today it's called flipping. Today it's called the flipping pedagogy, and the basic concept is that talking to kids isn't really powerful as a learning pedagogy. Talking to kids isn't a really tongue-tied today. Talking to kids isn't the most powerful type of methodology. There's no magic fairy dust between my mouth and a kid's ear. So I kind of recognized that early in my career that I couldn't just tell my kids stuff. I had to have them use content to create something. They had to engage with the content. Like I said before, the content can't be the most important thing to you. It has to be the art of teaching and learning. So early in my career, computers and the internet had been around for a few years. This was 1999, 2000. I actually took a seminar course, I actually took a course that I ended up teaching called City Voices, City Visions about videography and learning and kind of the pedagogy that goes behind what I was doing. But it really was to get kids to make videos. That was the purpose, and I believe ultimately that still is the purpose of why I created the channel. I wanted my kids to be doing videos, but I was talking too much to them. So I decided one day to turn the camera on, and I just screamed at the camera for like 10 minutes about the Constitution. And then I put it online. And a lot of kids didn't have access to that, so I burned a lot of CDs, CD-ROMs they were called, and I would hand them the kids and DVDs I would burn, and they'd go home and they'd watch them, or they'd put them on their iPods. and then they would listen to them. And I still lectured a little bit in the classroom, and I always liked doing that, but I had more time. I had more time to develop projects for kids to be engaged in the art of learning, that I was facilitating a learning experience rather than thinking I was the experience myself, and I'm a really good talker. But that didn't matter at the end of the day. So that was the inspiration behind Hughes history. I know there's another part of the question, so I'm going to jump cut as I look at my computer. Nope, that was it. That was the whole question. I'm going to answer the next one right now. Political turmoil. Oh no, how do I talk about political turmoil when my whole brand is I'm supposed to be non-biased? I'm supposed to be Johnny Cash. I'm supposed to be walking the line. And now Mr. Brooks is asking me about political turmoil. So I would say this as I continue to walk the line, because I know there's different types of people that are watching this. I would say that we've always had a need for politics and education, for kids to be aware of the system and of history in order to be critical thinkers. I'll say that. So I think that we need that more than ever. Constitutional, civics, education. Kids need to understand not only what the words say, but how they've been interpreted, the sweeping, motions of history and the stories behind those motions that sometimes aren't told very well. And then I think we'll have more critical thinkers. And then I think that that will transfer into more of an accountability at the ballot box. How was that for walking the line? So who was my favorite president? Who do I think gets too much glory, not enough glory? So if I had to pick one, I think I'd have to pick Teddy Roosevelt, not because I'm in love with Teddy Roosevelt, and not because he had huge legislative victories, although he did. But I do think that he kind of represented really kind of a different angle on the presidency, and especially being a progressive in the Republican Party. And one of the reasons he became president was because the New York Republicans couldn't stand the guy. They wanted to get him out, so they made him vice president. And then, of course, William McKinley's going to die, and Teddy Roosevelt's going to take the reins. But he was certainly a badass, and I love the story of him campaigning. I think would be the 1916 race where Woodrow Wilson won, and he came in back as a bull moose. But he actually, I think it was in Milwaukee. I'm going to go with Milwaukee, but I could be wrong. Where he actually went to give a speech, and he got shot. Dude got shot in the chest, I swear, and it like hit his speech. And then he was knocked out, and he got back up, and he gave a 2-hour speech after getting shot in the chest. So that's pretty cool. In terms of the worst president, I'm going to be Johnny Cash. I'm not going to answer that in current day fashion, but I would probably have to say James Buchanan. That's kind of the typical historical answer because the dude didn't do anything as the nation tore itself apart. In terms of the most underrated president, that's another rough one. I'm going to try to answer this on the fly, but maybe Harry Truman. I think that Harry Truman made some pretty bold moves in civil rights as a Democrat way back in 1948. I'm not supporting his decision to drop the nuclear bomb. We're not going to get into that, although I do have a video on it. But I do think that in terms of being like a real populist, maybe Truman, I'll have to say that. So if I could go back in time and witness one great moment in history, what would it be? I have read a lot on the JFK assassination, so as creepy as that is, as kind of terrible that is to say, maybe it would have to be Dealey Plaza, November 22nd, 1963, so I could figure out what the hell happened. So you're asking me about economics. That's probably a pretty dangerous thing, so I'm going to tell you honestly that I'm not an expert in economics, so I'm always a little bashful about talking about things that I haven't had experience in, that I haven't read about things. I think that too many times people form opinions, and those opinions become their badges of honor when they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. So what I would say is I'm probably a Keynesian at heart. I do believe that the government has a role in the economy. I kind of believe in pump spending, but I also don't think that too much control is a good thing either. So let's say a pragmatic Keynesian. So what makes an American hero? Oh my goodness, I can't believe you asked me that question. Now I'm having flashbacks to the greatest American hero. What a terrible television show that was. But if I had to put characteristics on a hero, and certainly you don't have to be an American to be a hero, you could be an Ethiopian hero. How about that? But in terms of characteristics of a hero, honesty, trustworthiness, and accountability, I think those are three great things. So in terms of what would make a great American president, those three things would be really great. Honesty, accountability, telling the truth, and also, telling the truth when it's not popular to tell the truth. I think that's probably important too. So hopefully you got a feel for Hughes history. Check us out online on YouTube. We have 450 videos spanning the cross-section of the social sciences. How about that, kids? And I want to thank you, the Southern Collective Experience, for inviting me to do this interview. You guys are doing your own great work. Keep it up as we continue to hopefully make the world a little bit smarter. Where attention goes, energy flows.